Hello, Suzanne. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
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 So you have a particular topic to discuss, which we are
Yeah,
doing spontaneously because,
very much so.
right, both of us,
Uh,
like even you came up with or was struck by the topic maybe an hour ago,
right.
and
Right.
I was struck by it through you maybe 15 minutes ago. So,
Right.
and it's no easy topic.
No, but it was one I thought we could at least do, a brief recording, a discussion
Right.
of just, given some of the stuff we do on the channel. So yeah, basically the question, what is art? And talk a little bit, the two of us about how we conceive of it, and how we think of it.
Right.
So yeah.
The immediate response that I have is goes back to Heidegger because Heidegger is also such an important thinker for our channel, and so um, I was thinking of his essay um, on the origin of the work of art. But I was wondering if we could go to that a bit later and start with
Sure.
something much more immediate, which is film, which is what
Right.
we discuss about mostly
Hmm.
on the channel, and think about how what is film as a form of art and what it is doing as such a form and what it does to us when it is doing whatever it is doing.
Right.
And I was thinking maybe we could begin there with
Sure.
the cinematic form of art and then go from. Before that, could I really ask you what form of art you're currently enjoying? Just so that we can make it also personal. I'm like reading this novel by Arundhati Roy called
Mm,
The Ministry of Utmost Happiness,
nice.
um, where she basically is doing a lot of liberatory politics through her art. And so that
Mm,
also could be something we can discuss, how art can do things which can
right.
in, involve politics and
Right.
criticism of power and so on.
Okay. Well, one thing I would start with, so for example, there was this essay I used to use a lot in teaching intro to philosophy classes. Usually towards the end of the term, we would read an essay by Kathleen Higgins, and it was called Beauty, Kitchen, Glamour. And sort of the core of that essay is a discussion about what is art. And so the way I would, sort of capture that essay and bring home to students certain ideas involved some criteria. I'm in the moment I'm can't be sure if it was Thomas Kulka who set forth these three criteria or someone else, but it's an idea that gets replicated in different thinkers. So um, there has, one way to approach the whole idea is to first sort of tease out what really distinguishes art from kitsch. And I've always found that to be such an amazing and fruitful way
Yeah.
to approach things. And obviously, you have to understand what is kitsch. Um, Kitsch can come in soothing forms or negative forms. And kitsch, in its essence, is something that never promotes new thinking. Rather, it always reinforces ideas that are prevalent in a given society. And again, it can be soothing or negative. Um, and so you have this notion of kitsch. It does not promote new ideas, it doesn't ask questions, and it reinforces things already widely held in a culture or society. And that, to be distinguished from art, um, sets forth these three criterion
Mm,
that is has to do with looking at emotiveness, the emotive nature of something,
mhm,
um, and whether or not the piece, whatever it is we're dealing with, causes the viewer, the reader, the listener to ask questions. All right. And third and finally, that it does indeed present new ways of thinking or understanding. And so, if we're going to take that as our starting point, right, we could talk about television shows or films, and books for that matter, or, pieces that are hanging on a person's wall. And we could think about, is this art or is it kitsch? And I just think that's a really good starting point. And then since you and I, it's been, most of what we're doing as far as art goes, we deal with film. You know, I think that might be why you and I share the interest in horror as a particular type of film. Uh, Obviously, it needs to be good quality because horror films, I think, can be uniquely positioned to fulfill the criteria very well. Um, so, presenting something to a viewer where they're put in a position where they are questioning, not only what is going on or what does something mean, um, but truly good film will prompt them to continue thinking about it long after the film has ended. Um, so there's the questioning. Obviously, the emotional aspect of it is there. And then, of course, the new ways of thinking or understanding something can be present in a good horror film. And as lots of people have noted, horror films often are making social political statements, whether more directly or sort of allegorically or metaphorically. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's a good sort of starting point, and obviously that can be easily tied into Heidegger with the notion that what's best in any given thinker, he says, is the great thinker's unthought. So
yeah.
we're presented with all these wonderful ideas, but their inherent richness is in that there's so much more to be uncovered or unconcealed just through thinking about those ideas.
So, wonderful starting point. And actually, one question that comes to me as you were speaking, it came to me is, would we say then that kitsch is basically a conformist category? That its mode of being and its mode of showing is um, it conforms with, or it simply um, dissolves into the sociopolitics that already sort of exists. And
Mhm.
um, and also then when you connected art to Heidegger and the unthought, another thought came to me about kitsch, because that's a good way to go to art. Is that the kitsch or the kitschy does not have an unthought, which
Mhm.
means that it does not have the element of the concealed possibilities. So it is all unconcealment,
Right.
which is how we can connect it to the flashy, which is
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
always a showing without hiding. And
Right.
when we talk about the hiding, we are talking about the hidden potential to be read in a different way. So
Right.
so with the kitsch, um, it's nothing is there which is held or withheld in reserve, and its complete or its entire mode of disclosure is that of constant presencing, constant showing, which could be
Mhm.
another way to think about the flashy. It's always disclosed, and there is no undisclosed potential which can come to you only when you have multiple viewings or readings of it, or you have multiple standpoints through which you look at something. Um, yes. So
Right.
does that make sense to you? This?
Yeah, completely. And so in that regard, the kitsch we could say is one dimensional. And it is facade only. There's not, like you pointed out, there's not a hidden depth
Mhm.
or a hidden potential for multiplicity of meanings, because kitsch only reinforces ideas that are already present and prevalent in the individual viewer or in the society, the culture, etc. Um, it's not going to promote questioning. It's not going to promote new thinking, but it might be very flashy. In fact, it can overwhelm you with its flashiness. And the essay I mentioned before about Higgins, by Kathleen Higgins, that's actually the distinction she draws in that essay between true beauty in the classical sense and glamour.
Mhm.
Okay, because she wants to bring forth the ancient notion of beauty as being sort of a identity with the good and the true, right? Sort of dimensions of singularity, where um, there's a depth that almost she almost implies a hidden but endless depth, so that there's continuous possibilities for a new understanding. Just imagine we were looking at a painting, whereas kitsch, that will never happen.
Mm.
There, it's very straightforward. It's right there, but yet it can be incredibly glamorous. Therefore, it's
Right.
not beautiful at all. And of course, glamour. She does etymology on that,
Mm.
and that's tied to interestingly enough, to a certain kind of bewitchment,
Mm.
which is, I think of the hex of technology that Heidegger speaks of there.
Yeah.
But what is glamorous purely by what has been done from the outside, so to speak. So you're talking about, makeup and filters, marketing gimmicks, something like that, the flashiness you made
Right.
reference to, without any kind of depth. Whereas something that's truly beautiful or truly art, and again, we don't mean beautiful as in pleasing or pleasant, but art or beauty is going to have a depth and potentially a seemingly infinite one, where there are endless possibilities for a new way of understanding it or new questions that are prompted, and a multiplicity of viewpoints that one
Right.
might adopt.
Right. Now, there are modes of self-presentation which would fall under what is generally designated as glamour, but it and what is generally designated as flashy, but it may not uh, be a mere repetition of what is already there. If would that manifestation of, let's say, fashion um, be a form of art and not a form of glamour? Though, I mean, from a colloquial standpoint, both would fall under the category of glamour. I'll give you
Right.
one example would be a lot of uh, gay art and a
Mhm.
form of self-presentation
Mhm.
comes through, um, yeah, bodily and sartorial self-manifesting or self-presenting in a way that is queer in comparison to society standards. So it's
Mhm.
not reinforcing those standards. It's
Right.
in a way rebelling against those standards. But it is doing it through fashion.
Right.
So now then we have a distinction in our hands of glamour, which is conformist versus glamour, which is making a point which society always denies or suppresses. So would there be a distinction within what is generally categorized as glamour, do you think?
Right. No, yes, because I understood what you're getting at there, and that certain things came to mind, like say um, a drag performer,
Yes.
right? Obviously is going to be glamorous. And certainly Kathleen Higgins' discussion of glamour as distinguished from beauty
Mm,
would be one in which we could say, well, there's this one way we're understanding glamour, and then there's this other way where we just are talking about, like you said, presentation. Um, but certainly a drag performer, um, no matter the content of the performance, is already a challenge
yes, that's the
to a status quo. And so that is actually one of the key components of art, that there is going to be some kind of challenge to the status quo. And again, that's the whole idea about it's going to prompt a questioning or prompting a new thinking, a new way of seeing something. That element would necessarily be present. Um, and so, people are often entertained by kitsch,
right.
and the argument there is why we have that distinction between the soothing and the negative kitsch, because soothing kitsch, that's what it does.
Mm,
It provides you with a sense of comfort, familiarity. It may bring up nostalgia and sentimentality.
right.
In our world, especially the modern Western world, I often will say that we basically live off a calendar of kitsch. So
Right.
our whole calendar of the year is punctuated by holidays and specific sorts of celebrations that are inherently kitsch. They
Mm,
are meant to soothe, reinforce, provide a sense of safety and security and familiarity.
right.
And by no means should we think that, oh, we got to get rid of all kitsch or something like that. That's not the point. The point is that it's not something that's bringing forth a challenge
Right.
or prompting new thinking.
From how I see it, the crux of the issue is the third point in the three in the three criteria. The third point, which is the new way of thinking or the new way of being, um, which in a way kind of sums up the questioning and the emotional element. It
Right.
seems to me that
Mhm.
the crux is this new way of thinking. Now, I also feel that um, with with the question of the unthought, there can be modes of expression and modes of being or self-presentation, which is a mode of being in the world, which can point to the unthought or the unnoticed elements of social structures. So, for example, your sort of excellent example of the drag performance, um, by its very being and its performance and its presentation, um, can point to the unthought potential in which society can be restructured. So, for
Mhm.
example, if we have a society which is being run or structured around certain binary gender possibilities, um, the drag performance, and when it is also done in the most amazing ways, can has the potential to reveal this unnoticed, unthought, unattended side or unattended potential that society has of being structured differently. So I think that to that extent, then the drag performance wouldn't be um, the reiteration of the status quo, and thus it wouldn't fall under the kitsch category
Right.
in this distinction that we are drawing. So yeah, that makes excellent sense. There's one more point that I was thinking about. Um, which I don't have the quotation right now, and I don't want to like look it up right away. So
Right.
there's this thing, I think it's an Agamben, but I may be mistaken, of the notion of the ornamental, the idea that
Mm,
some objects in our world can be uh, can have this ornamental property. They are so conspicuous that by the sheer fact of not dissolving into their environment, they somehow bring the environment into conspicuous light. So,
mm,
for example, one example I can think of, not in art, but generally, could be that if there is a social system or a social structure um, in place, and we see an act which is taking place in this social structure, which is, let's say, that it's an act of radical kindness, of a
mm,
radical kind. Um, it's so out of sync with its
mm,
environment that the
mm-hmm.
environment is called to question by that act, right? So, because the act is not dissolving into its environment, it's not like just following the dictates of its environment, but it's actually standing apart from its environment, and
Right.
which is its ornamentality. It's not like for example, if we have stones and there's one gem among the stones, what makes the ornamentality, what makes for the gem's ornamentality is that it stands out of the other 10 objects. So this
Right.
act could be so unlike its environment, so jarring with its environment, that it is ornamental in the sense of standing out, and it can also have the potential of bringing the environment itself into question. Um,
Right.
One example maybe could be Jesus saying that if you, this is a very famous statement of his, maybe it's from the Sermon on the Mount, if I'm not mistaken, where he says that if a thief steals your coat, give him also your cloak. It's
Right.
so bizarre, that commandment, that it brings our sort of commercial ethics into question, that it's always give and take in equal measure in the world of
Right.
ethics. So, because the ornament looks like um, because the ornament is flashy, I was thinking of that in contrast to the sort of flash that you're talking about. So, yeah,
Right.
that's another thought that came to my mind.
No, that
Yeah.
and that's a good one. And what came to my mind as soon as it was clear to me how you were explaining the ornament's function as
Hmm.
becoming like and without any effort, just by virtue of being a counterpoint
Yeah.
to everything around it, which then brings into your awareness everything around it. What jumped to my mind, I think it's Baraka, that film Baraka, which is just a I love that film. I love also his other films, Koyana Scotzi.
Mhm.
But in the film, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I believe there's somewhere like I want to say it's definitely a Western city. It might be New York City, and there's a lot of shots of the busyness of cities. Um, and people's going, and all of a sudden what you have is a Buddhist, I believe it's a Buddhist, practicing slow walking. And
Ah,
so this person is taking very slow steps, and that to me is a perfect illustration of what you were just saying, because you need nothing with it. No dot, you need nothing other than that image. And what immediately you see the slow walker, and what that does is it brings to your awareness the
the
sort
fun.
of insane
Yes.
speed at which everyone else is
Wonderful.
moving.
Yes.
And so, in that regard, that practice
So the
is art, a form of art,
that was my question.
right?
Yes. I was going to
Yes.
ask you if that is
Practice.
a form of art.
And
Yeah.
it also makes me just think of Aristotle's concept of the exemplar and the role the exemplar plays. The exemplar can only be an exemplar because it stands out
Right.
from everything else.
Right.
So, in a society of, I believe what Aristotle thought was true in his time remains true today. In a society of people who are mediocre in their ethics, if you will, they sort of stay in that in between region. They're not wholly virtuous, they're not wholly vicious.
Right.
To see a truly virtuous person, or
Right.
as you said, a radical act of kindness that really is like unusual.
Yeah.
You'll see that, but something happens where then you really are seeing everything else as the contrast. Um, and so,
And,
yeah,
and that contrast can become the first motivation for social
mhm,
critique.
right,
Because in order to begin critiquing, I need to stand at a distance from what I'm critiquing. I need that which I'm critiquing to be its contours to be brought to
right,
light. And
right.
then this so for example, the slow walking as a form of
Mhm,
art. Um, I mean, I can think of dance performances
mhm,
doing the same thing. Then it gives us the sort of critical distance from which we can begin a critical analysis of the social situation that we inhabit. So in that sense, then the artist's work becomes, um, and I also think that is why, and this is something that just struck me in the middle of the previous sentence. That is also why I think that there is this image of the artist as a little bit crazy.
mhm.
So art, uh, uh, and now I sort of see that phenomenologically, if not psychologically. The what is happening there maybe is that the work of art, and obviously the artist who is attached to the work of art, and in the case of dancing and in the case of walking, the artist is the work of art. Um, in these instances, um, because the artist is in a way distant from, not absorbed in, not bewitched by the world in which they are, um, they do experience, I think, this sort of suspension of the normative ways of being, which
Right.
makes the society a little bit unintelligible to them, and they become a bit
Mhm.
unintelligible to the society. I mean, why is this guy not going out to work at 9 a.m. and coming
Right.
back home at 5 p.m., but rather is sitting in his home drawing something on a big canvas? Why is he? I mean, that is unintelligible to society because
Right.
its intelligibility has been formed by this sort of prevailing way of being. So, um, and that's where the eccentricity of art comes in.
Right.
So art is eccentric, but not in this sort of psychological sense, but in this more deep phenomenological sense. And I mean by phenomenology, I mean the question of intelligibility of the world in which
Mhm.
we are situated and so on. So in that sense, kitsch would not be eccentric. In fact, it is
Right.
flashy without the eccentricity.
Right. It's run of the mill. Kitsch is run of the mill, common, normative, ordinary.
Right.
Um, Again, it's going to reinforce and soothe. There's the negative form, which we could talk about. But what came to mind when you were talking was also the way in which Heidegger's ideas map right onto this discussion, because kitsch is a product of Gestell. It's a product of our framing, produced by purely calculative
In
thinking,
in
you know,
fact,
and advertising is my favorite way of approaching this with students is to
in
look at
just
advertising.
to interrupt, I'm sorry, but it is in fact you who brought it to my attention that Heidegger even uses this term. I did not know
Mm,
that, but yes, I mean, actually, in Heidegger's I don't want to use aesthetics because he hates that term, but in
right.
his philosophy of art,
Mm,
yeah, he uses the word kitsch in relation to the Gestell, and
right.
advertisement is an amazing, yeah. Who was it?
Exactly.
I don't remember who said it. Maybe uh, Raymond Williams, I don't know, somebody in the cultural studies world who said that the dominant artistic form of late modernity is advertisement.
Uh-huh.
That's
Exactly.
that's
And
our
and
dominant art.
and so that, and in kitsch in all its forms, as a product of calculus thinking and Gestalt, necessarily never is poiesis, right? Which for Heidegger is only the result of moving beyond Gestalt, so Gelassenheit and meditative thinking. And so again, the Buddhist slow walking, the dancer dancing,
So
the painting, it's all coming from somewhere that is not part of the machine, so to speak.
so could we then really break down how the the Buddhist walking, slow walking, is a form of poiesis. And maybe you could take that. I'll just begin with what he basically means by poiesis. From my understanding, um, poiesis is a form of creation where something new is brought into being, and it's also related to thinking in the sense that new possibilities of engaging with being is also brought into view through
Mhm.
poiesis. And if understood phenomenologically, we don't just mean bringing into presence or bringing into the world a piece of art, although that's important too, but how the piece of art in some sense alters our existing understanding of being and our existing comportment with being. So a new possibility is suddenly opened up by this act of poiesis. And if we want uh, concrete examples from someone like Heidegger, to him, um, something like Van Gogh's
Mhm.
painting um, opens up, or at least potentially opens up, a world uh, around it. And the other example he gives is the Greek temple, which is
Mhm.
the so all these are examples of the artist opening up a new possible world of possibilities, new world of uh, engaging with being. Um,
Right.
so
And to the viewer,
yeah,
again, whether we're talking about the person who sees the slow walker on the street or looks at Van Gogh's painting or reads one of Herdland's poems, um, there's not going to be a uniformity in their understanding and
no,
response to
no,
it. It's going to be, again, it's almost just like opening a door um, into the infinite or the abyss or something like that, where the possibilities are innumerable. And hence, with a true piece of art, how you interpret it, how I interpret it, how someone else sees it, it can vary greatly. And moreover, I think we have maybe mentioned this in a different recording, I'm not sure, but we can encounter a single work of art multiple times and experience it differently in those successive times.
I,
It's not as if there's only one way that we experience it, right?
that itself, like you put it, that itself is an indicator that we are dealing with art. Because obviously
Right,
everything claims to be art, of course, but the indicator, the symptom of dealing with an actual genuine work of art is that it returns. We return to it with new possibilities every time. So
mhm.
I often uh, when not talking about art, but about philosophical texts. I mean, if we take a text like Mein Kampf, which would be
Mhm.
an extreme example of this, that text is not going to give you anything else. It is always going to give you the same thing because it is one dimensional, and
Right.
it's going to give you its pure anti-Semitic uh, um,
Grievance driven.
grievance-driven, anti-Semitic, that's what it vile propaganda. That's what it will give you every time you return to it. So you know that that's a symptom that this isn't a great piece of work, and it isn't a great piece of art. It isn't uh, a, uh, any form of art at all. But when you go to certain works, like even Being in Time, and I say often, um, I mean, if when asked about the whole issue of Heidegger being a Nazi, one way out, at least for me, is that there are so many interpretations that that work allows, that the work stands on its own. In a way, Heidegger can even be set aside. The work itself becomes
Right.
its own
Right.
entity, right?
Right.
And once we go to it, when we go to it again and again, it comes with new possibilities for improving or adjusting our vision of reality. And yeah, that then becomes a symptom that we are dealing with art in the first place,
Right.
you know. So
And I think that what you've just noted about it, that characteristic, if you will, we can see is, the truth of some films, right? And that's why, there are certain films that we will go to.
yes,
And even if we get to the point, because there's a couple films where I'm almost to that point where I can recite the entire thing. Um, but I still feel like it's not that I'm going to reach the end point and that film ceases to be art or something like that, even if I can recite to you the entire dialogue. Rather, I think because it's an interaction between the living human being and the work of art,
yeah,
the human is continuously unfolding. And so, for example, what I took from a film at age 22 and later at 30 and then later at 45, that is still evolving and unfolding. And so that's another way in which I think real art is powerful because it's not like, oh, I've seen it all. I know it backwards and forwards. I, at Dasein, am an evolving being. And so it can impact different at a later date and thus still promote a new thought, a new idea, or what have you.
and it's also maybe because you're bringing a new world to the
Right.
film from the
Mhm.
22-year-old self to the 45-year-old self. You
Mhm.
are the world is different. The world that the
Mhm.
film occupies is different. The world you occupy is different. And um,
Mhm.
so it's never the same film, although you know all its lines by heart.
Right.
So yeah, this inexhaustibility
Mhm.
is what makes for art. And now I'm thinking, now that you, after hearing you, I feel that the art happens as a verb between the two, between the viewer and the film.
Mhm.
And when it is a piece of fiction, let's say it is between the reader and the text. So there's an in-betweenness here, which is where the art happens as an
Right.
activity. So you are
Mm.
as much making that film as the as the as the director and so on. So
Right.
yeah, there's this in-betweenness that is happening as well, I think when we are dealing with so it's an interstitial space,
Mhm.
and that space has to also be replenished. It needs to be like a plant needs to be given water continuously, or an animal has to be fed constantly. That interstitial space also needs to be fed, and your new experiences
Right.
and the changes in the world that the film itself is situated in. This is the food that keeps that
Mhm.
interstitial space active and new every time you return to it. So yeah, so I think that that dynamic is also important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. The emphasis on the that interstitial space, the sort of in between. I think you used that phrase just then. Um, Also, just the relevance of the nothing, because
Yeah,
the nothingness and so that emptiness is. And now I'm really thinking about wow, that what you hit upon may well be sort of crucial to the very concept of the aletheia or the unconcealing and as an ongoing never ending process. I mean, I we're finite, we will end as individual beings.
right.
um, but a great film seen at one point in time and then seen by another person 50 years later, 150 years later, we can't possibly predict what kinds of meanings
Yes.
and questions and ideas could be birthed from that experience as opposed to the one that we had. So that I think is a really key point too that you just made,
There's
and it's I like
also
it well
a
too
lot of
because it also creates a triangulation.
right.
So it's not like the one to one, the viewer and the piece of art. It's really um, the viewer, the piece of art in the world, if you will, or Earth, right? Earth and world. So
Yes.
um,
And
multiple.
also I think there's a lot of humanism in that because um that in between space, which is a space of the coming together of the art and the enjoyer or the recipient of the art, that space is situated in a particular space and time, and
Mhm,
it can keep changing. The space and time can be changing, but at the same time, it often becomes the mediating space for two people from different
mhm,
spaces to come together.
mhm,
And in an interesting way, it's not because we share the same experiences or we are from the same place that that space opens for us. It's often when we are not from, when we come from different
mhm.
experiences and different spaces, it's then that that space actually robustly opens. So,
Right.
so that in between space is also the space for bringing people together with their differences. And it's often
Mhm.
the difference which kind of makes for a better union or communication
Right.
between people. So there's that also happening. There's a I don't know if humanism is the right word for it, but there's that communication between people
Right.
across boundaries that is made
Mhm,
possible by this space which is in some sense without boundary, with very I mean uh the space between I mean the space of the of the film and of the viewer, that's in some sense clear, but this in between thing, it's that is what
mhm.
is boundless, and interestingly that is what allows for people to come together across boundaries.
Right.
Something's happening
Right.
there which I think needs more thought, but but there's something
Yeah.
human about that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something we will want to give more time and thought to in our work. Um,
Can I
but
ask
yeah,
you sorry,
no, go ahead.
if I could ask you, there's no, I mean, this is, there's no, maybe there's no ready answer, but how do you experience a piece of work which is really distant from your world? Basically, a piece of work which is from a completely different world, completely different linguistic, cultural, and spatial realm. How is your interaction with works like that?
Um, I would say incredibly positive. But again, just as an individual human being, I've always, as far as I can recall, uh, very much interested in anything that's different.
Yeah.
So whether we're talking, music, um, cultures, cultural types of uh, expressions. Um, I prefer honestly spending time watching films and shows that are foreign. And
Mm.
obviously, I'm only exposed to what I'm exposed to, so or what I seek out. And but I do think now that you brought that up, it's just now occurring to me that uh, when I encounter resistance, say in a student, when in the traditional classroom, right? If I'm going to show, because I used to make a point of trying to show a foreign film, um, and sometimes there's resistance to reading, unfortunately. They don't want to read subtitles. But
Really.
when I have encountered that resistance just to the idea of, looking at a piece of foreign film, I do feel like that there's, for whatever reason, so there are people that are feel threatened. And I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that's that fundamental sort of basic fear of what's different or unknown. And again, maybe I'm an outlier. I don't know, but I've always liked it. I think you and I've talked about that, especially with the interest in horror from an early age, and even reading horror novels when I'm like 8 years old, starting at about age 8, reading Stephen King. So the novel, the different, the strange, the unfamiliar, the foreign, even the threatening, I've always found like fascinating and interesting. And so I don't know if that is
Yeah,
common
yeah.
or not. But yeah, so very much interested in it. Um, and yeah, I also I can find a lot of that's why I was so into the kitsch distinction from art with students because once I really got a hold of those ideas, I realized of how much of what passes for art in the United States
Mhm.
is kitsch. It's just kitsch. It's not art at all and yet consumed voraciously like McDonald's hamburgers, right?
Which would be a good sort of segue into the advertisement industry because we mentioned it, we did not discuss it much. So, what do you think art uh, art is doing when it is engaged in advertisement? How is it different from? So, what do you think is the difference between a McDonald's advertisement, a 2-minute advertisement clip from a poem by Hölderlin? Where exactly? What's the core? What is the meat of the distinction, do you think?
The way in which the ad will always be presenting you with something you're already familiar with. There's, I mean, I actually gave up television in the year 2005. So for these 21 years, I am not exposed to very much advertising. Now, sometimes I would seek it out because I wanted to do stuff about it in class. And so I was like, well, let me find newer ads because I was starting to use dated stuff. But in general, I do not listen to ads on the radio. If in the car, I actually will turn it down. I don't want to hear it. And I don't watch television, so I don't see that. Online, obviously, you see some
But
ads here and there.
but they'll try to bring it everywhere. So if
Watching a YouTube video, they're going to force me to
yes,
watch an ad. And all I can say about it is that I find it to be so completely insulting to my intelligence. Truly, it's like unbelievable to me. And again, I'm not exposed to a lot, but it's so stupid. And it tries to be funny, I think, a lot of it. Um, but it's never
but it,
the case that I'm
it but it's
like in awe.
but it's stupidity. You think that the stupidity of it lies in its conformism or its
Pandering. It's
hmm,
pandering.
hmm,
It's a form of pandering to often, not if not all, it's not always, but often the lowest common denominator of whatever we're talking about.
Right.
All right. So whether we're still trying to sell car wax with large breasts
Right.
or, you know, insurance with a talking gecko. Um, yeah, it's just there's nothing. I
So
mean,
in a
I
way, in a way, the aim of the ad is never to actually startle you, because um, I mean, it wants to exploit your knowledge or your cultural background and your cultural fears and hopes and so on without messing with them. I mean,
well, right, but that's where the distinction between the soothing and the negative kitsch is important.
yes,
Because soothing kitsch, it won't provoke any negative emotions in you. It, like I said, it's reassuring. It's,
yes.
makes you feel good. Now, there is a form of advertising, and it's quite powerful. And research shows it works, if you will, that is negative kitsch. And now that is aimed at promoting the viewer to have negative feelings. And that's most predominant, I would say, in ads that are aimed at used to be primarily women. Now that's starting to change, but about your appearance or anything having to do with how you see yourself. That's negative kitsch. So,
Yes.
a Victoria's Secret ad that shows you a
So,
near emaciated model, it knows it's going to make you feel bad, but
so
the idea is that you will lust, right?
right,
The emotions are lust, desire, perhaps shame, but that they found is a motivator for spending money,
right.
right?
So just to, because it's so interesting. So art, on the other hand, would let you, it can't force you, but it will allow you to question the beauty standards of our society itself,
Mm-hmm.
while advertising would exploit the existing beauty standards. I mean, and because it's exploiting that, it's its resource. In
Right.
other words, just like a forest is a resource for wood, your existing standards of beauty are the resource for your attention, or the resource for your attention. So
Mm-hmm.
why would I go about destroying that resource when I can actually manipulate it and use it and exploit it to
Right.
get your attention, not just your, like, your mental attention, but the attention of your desire. So,
Right.
art is not interested in that. It's interested in altering the very
Right.
standards by which your attentions are structured. So that would
Right.
be an interesting, I think, a distinction between what advertising is doing and what somebody like Hölderlin is doing, or whether they are
Right.
doing it consciously or not. I mean, with advertising, it's quite conscious, but at least with
Right.
the genuine artist, it's not that conscious. They just, um, and I think because they yeah, I think because with advertising, because um, they're so into the exploitation of existing standards. It's not in their interest to overcome those
Right.
standards, or to
Not
make
at
you
all.
question those standards. Yeah. I mean,
Not exactly.
I'll give an example. There's a product called which used to be called Fair and Lovely in India, because the point, it was a cream. It still exists. So it's a cream which makes your skin fairer, lighter. And
Oh my
yeah,
God.
because there's a lot of color consciousness in Indian society. So so it was called Fair and Lovely. Fair, you become fairer, you become lighter. Your skin tone can become lighter by wearing
Mhm.
that cream. It was a highly famous, like a household product.
Right.
Now it's changed its name. It's called Light and Lovely or something like that. It's no.
Oh,
I'll just check what it is called. It's called. And this it's a good point. Uh, wait. Oh, now it's called Glow and Lovely. Now,
Oh,
now the thing is that it did not, when skin color was important,
mm-hmm,
at least till 2010, uh,
mm-hmm,
nobody thought anything culturally wrong with judging beauty on the basis of skin color. So till
right,
the time that that was the status quo, Fair and Lovely was very happy exploiting it and
right,
calling themselves that, and did
right,
not contribute to subverting it. Because why would it? I mean, it wants to exploit it. But once it saw that the culture has changed because of
right,
other reasons, it did not do anything to change the culture.
mm-hmm,
Because of other sort of um, cultural awareness movements that
mm-hmm,
changed. Once the culture changed, it changed to suit
right,
the new cultural paradigm.
right.
So that's
And in that way, as you noted, that it's exploiting,
yeah,
a norm, a beauty standard. The advertising is also aimed at exploiting the human consciousness
absolutely.
around those things because that's the whole point of the negative kitsch. So,
Yes.
when and again, it doesn't even, okay, say the ad involves a woman that's beautiful in a very typical sort of way established by a certain kind of society. It's not just that so say a heterosexual man is supposed to see it and feel lust. The idea is that the woman will see it and feel that as well in the sense of envy, not
Yes,
lust,
you're
like
right.
man would, but an envious desire
Right.
to be to look like that. And so the advertising is capitalizing upon two different resources there, both the
Right.
standard that's in operation, but also sort of the consciousness of the viewer.
Right.
And unfortunately, it turned out that they could sell a lot of products by making people feel bad about themselves,
Yes.
or less than, or not good enough, however you want to put it. But it's a negative
Right.
kitsch. It
Right.
still reinforces those same standards. And so I love your example and how there was a shift in the consciousness of the culture such that then, the corporation or company had to change their advertising approach, right,
Yes.
to better
And,
tap in.
and companies, especially advertising, so especially negative kitsch, um, is often on the face of it quite liberal in the sense that they will never do anything that is generally what is called cancelable. And
Right.
so they will have whatever the culture demands is the good thing. They want to be associated with that good ethical thing,
Right.
not because
Mm-hmm.
they brought it about or are interested in bringing about those new possibilities, but because they want to just align with it and exploit it for
Right.
profit. So the one thing that this kitsch and this negative kitsch, as in some ways properly emblematized by ads or the advertising industry, the one thing that it will not do is critique.
Right.
So
Never.
it won't,
Never.
yes. Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if your mode of being involves holding or if your mode of being involves, yeah, holding a jar of honey at 6 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock in the morning, that's just something that you do. And if I want to make money out of that behavior, I'll sell you nicely holdable jars, which can be held most comfortably for 3
Yes.
hours. Why would I go and critique the activity? Or
Right.
what's the benefit in critiquing that behavior rather than using
Right.
the behavior to make money? So
Right.
so no matter what we are doing, it's not interested in the rationality of those acts, but
Mm-hmm.
in. So I think that would be the example of non-art, which is
Mm-hmm.
flashy because obviously an advertisement is some kind of art. Using the word within inverted commas.
Right.
It does have, I mean, it involves acting, it involves direction, you have to read a
Hmm.
line, you may have to dance. Yeah.
Hmm.
All those elements are there, but it's not doing that additional thing that qualifies something like
Right.
that slow walking Buddhist as an artist, as opposed to this.
Mm.
So that additional element then, I think, goes to this new ways of thinking point that you mentioned as your three criteria. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's where it is. And I think that um, this kind of gives a good handle of making the distinction.
Hmm.
Because after that, there are other distinctions to be made. Because within art, you have to make the distinction between good and bad art.
Right.
So the bad art is also doing this function, but doing it badly or doing it ineptly,
Right.
right? So
Right.
that's there, but but still, even if it is doing that ineptly, it still is art of some kind. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. So yeah, so that was good.
that was
And that
good.
was a
And
good little
yes, and we should maybe later on actually tackle that next problem. Because with
right.
Heidegger, we have this notion of the great artist. And
Hmm.
there's also another thing there which often comes up, which we have already discussed, but we could once again in that next segment, which is isn't it elitist to favor great art as opposed to what we are calling not great art? So
Right.
so
Oh yeah.
it looks
So yeah, we
elitist, but
should
yeah, but it isn't
right.
elitist. So we should maybe
We
go to
should
that next.
definitely do another one about that and
Yes.
discussions about so-called, the fine arts and
Yeah.
things like that. So yeah, but this
So
was a good start
it was a
for it.
good start. So once we have distinguished what art is through a negative approach of distinguishing it from kitsch, from flashy
Right. Right.
presentations, now we have art in our hand in some provisional way. Not that we have defined it finally, but in
Mhm.
some provisional way, we have a handle, and now we can go and do additional things within that domain. So yeah, this was a
Right.
good one, I think.
Great. Well, thank you guys, and be sure to like and subscribe.